I walked into that furniture store with my heart floating. I'd finally bought my own little house, no more cramped rentals or hand-me-down apartments. As I wandered through the showroom, I felt this sudden rush. My long hours, my missed weekends, my never-ending hustle, everything led me here. I tested cushions, ran my hand along soft fabric, and pictured myself curled up with a mug of tea. I found the perfect sectional, gray with a cozy throw blanket. My grin stretched wide as I walked to the cashier. I handed over my bank card, confident in my savings. After all, I'd worked a decade for this moment. The cashier swiped once, then again. My stomach tightened. She cleared her throat and said, "It's declined." My cheeks went hot. "That's impossible," I whispered. I tried to laugh it off, certain it was some glitch. The manager came over, glanced at the register, and apologized like it was my fault. My mind spun. My entire body buzzed with embarrassment. I left without the couch. I told myself it was a technical error, but I couldn't ignore the strange weight in my chest. Something felt off, way off, and I needed to find out why. The next morning I marched straight to my bank, eyes burning from lack of sleep. My stomach was twisted in knots. I almost expected them to say, "Oh, it's fixed now. Here's your new card." But the banker's face went pale the second he pulled up my account. He clicked a few times, swallowed, and finally said, "Miss Monroe, your balance is 0. My heart hammered so loud I was sure he could hear it. "No," I blurted, leaning over the counter. "That's not right. I had over $80,000. Check again." My voice shook. I felt a headache drum behind my eyes. He showed me the transactions. Every cent of my savings, gone. 82,000 to be exact. My mind screamed. I stared at the list of withdrawals, trying to make sense of the dates and amounts. Could it be identity theft? Some random hacker? I kept blinking, waiting for him to say, "Oops, big mistake." But he didn't. He just printed the records and gently slid them toward me. I stood there, numb, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The room spun. The reality sank in like a knife. My entire future had vanished in an instant. I clutched those papers on my drive home, replaying every sacrifice I'd made to build that savings. I saw myself during college, working late shifts at the campus cafe and tutoring kids for extra money. I remembered how I crammed textbooks in my backpack, alongside my uniform for the diner. I'd lived in the cheapest rooms I could find, sometimes sharing with strangers just to cut costs. Friends invited me to Cancun, to ski trips, to fancy concerts. I always said no. I didn't want debt. I was terrified of ever being homeless or helpless again, so I learned to grind. After college, I still played it safe. I skipped vacations, saved holiday bonuses, never splurged unless it was essential. Over time, that bank account grew from a few hundred to a few thousand, and then soared past 50, 60, 80 grand. It felt like a shield, protecting me from the chaos my family had taught me to fear. Now, that shield was ripped away. I tried to steady my breathing, but my eyes burned with tears. All those cold mornings, backaches, missed birthday parties, every sacrifice. Gone. I gripped my steering wheel, feeling heartbreak boil into anger. Someone had taken my safety net, and they would answer for it. I reached home in a haze, determined to find the culprit. I spread out the bank statements on my tiny kitchen table, analyzing the times and amounts. They all pointed to transfers made over the last 6 weeks. My eyes moved to the recipient name column, and I froze. Jacob R. Monroe. Jacob Monroe? My brother, Jake. The name was so familiar that at first it didn't click. Then my blood turned cold. My own brother? The same man I'd barely spoken to in years? The same person who never held a steady job, who hopped from business venture to startup every other month? I stared at the name like it was a foreign word. My memory flooded with images. Jake laughing in our living room, sweet-talking our parents, borrowing money he never returned. But this was different. He had actually emptied my life savings. Something inside me cracked. I couldn't believe he'd dare cross this line. My stomach twisted in betrayal and fury. I fumbled for my phone, almost dropping it. I needed answers, but I also needed to breathe. My heart pounded. My mind raced. How could my own flesh and blood do this? I thought, if it's true, he won't get away with it. I spent 2 exhausting weeks calling Jake's phone non-stop. Voicemail after voicemail, text after text. No response. I messaged family members, asking if they'd seen him. They shrugged, said he was busy. Some pretended they didn't know where he lived. The whole thing stank of secrecy. Then, one afternoon, my phone chimed with a text that nearly made my heart stop. I needed the money urgently. Relax. It's not like you were going to spend it all at once. Family forgives, right? His audacity made me shake. I read those words over and over, my blood boiling. Urgent for what? And how dare he add a smug emoji like I was just supposed to laugh it off. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the phone. My chest felt tight, my head dizzy with rage. I typed back, my heart thumping. Family doesn't steal. Thieves don't get forgiveness. They get consequences. I hit send. The phone stayed silent for a while, but I could almost imagine him grinning wherever he was. My fury grew with each heartbeat. He thought he could get away with this. But I'd show him what happens when you push a person who has fought for every inch of her life. Growing up, Jake was always the star. The golden child with a dimpled smile, charming teachers and neighbors. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the reliable daughter. If Jake got in trouble for ditching class, our parents smoothed it over. When he wrecked Mom's car, they found a way to blame his friends. Money for me was tight. Money for him magically appeared. I can still hear my dad boasting, Jake's just figuring himself out, while I was told to take extra shifts and stay out of trouble. Jake's mistakes were forgiven instantly, but my smallest mishaps were pinned on me for weeks. As kids, I resented him for getting away with everything, and I hated myself for never speaking up. As we grew older, I realized he used that favoritism to skate through life. He never held a steady job. He partied, couch surfed, and came home only to suck up money and excuses. The worst part? I envied how effortlessly he was loved. Now, all that old anger churned inside me. I'd saved my money out of fear and self-reliance. He'd swiped it without a hint of remorse. My brother, the golden child, had found a new, horrible way to confirm what I always suspected. I couldn't trust him. Shaking, I called my parents. I half expected them to be furious on my behalf. But when I finally blurted out, Jake stole my life savings, their response crushed me. Dad sighed heavily. Jake's going through a lot right now, he murmured, as though that excused everything. Mom chimed in, You're strong, Mina. You always land on your feet. Don't make this a bigger deal than it has to be. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. Make it a bigger deal? My life savings was gone, and they wanted me to let it slide? It felt like I was screaming into a void. Every muscle in my body tensed with frustration. They started telling me stories about Jake's recent hardships, from rumored breakups to job disappointments. Not once did they acknowledge that his actions destroyed everything I'd built. I realized in that moment, they knew he would be forgiven. They'd taught him that he could do anything and walk away scot-free. I hung up, tears burning my eyes. The call ended with them urging me to be compassionate. I realized then, no help was coming from my parents. I was alone in this fight. I needed a timeline. I started combing through old emails, bank notices, and scanned documents from 3 years ago. That was when I'd had a major surgery. My appendix had nearly burst. I was in bed for weeks, too weak to keep track of anything. I found a peculiar message from my mother dated shortly after my hospitalization. Something about a temporary power of attorney to safeguard my finances while I recovered. She claimed it was for my own good, just to pay my bills if I couldn't. I remembered signing something while heavily medicated, but I had no idea it was so all-inclusive. Digging deeper, I discovered that power of attorney had never been officially canceled. And guess who had used it? Jake. I checked the records, he'd made changes to my account permissions, bypassed certain security checks, and gained direct access. My heart pounded so hard I felt dizzy. My own mother helped him file that paperwork. She probably thought it was harmless at the time. Or maybe not. Either way, she'd handed him the keys to my future, and he'd used them to rob me blind. My eyes stung. They'd pulled this off while I was lying in bed, trusting them with my life. Fuming, I marched into a lawyer's office with a folder stuffed full of evidence. I dropped it on the table like I was slamming down a winning poker hand. But my confidence wavered as the lawyer scanned through my documents. He explained that, yes, I had a case. Jake committed theft by draining my account. The fraudulent power of attorney could be challenged. But this wasn't a simple criminal matter, unless I proved outright intent to defraud beyond the power of attorney. The police might view it as a family dispute, pushing it toward a civil lawsuit instead. And that could take months, maybe years. I sat stiff in the chair, swallowing anger. So what? Jake just got to stroll off with my money? The lawyer tried to reassure me. I could sue for damages. I could even escalate it if more evidence arose. But money already spent might be hard to recover. I left the office feeling heavier than when I arrived. My hopes of a swift, clean victory evaporated. Instead, I faced the uphill climb of legal fees, drawn-out trials, and uncertain outcomes. I thought about Jake laughing somewhere, blowing my money. A new wave of determination filled me. I'd fight, no matter how long it took. A month later, I got the call that felt like a punch to the gut. My bank informed me my mortgage payment had bounced. Insufficient funds, they said politely, as if those two words didn't threaten my entire home. The dream I'd nurtured, a place to call my own, was now hanging by a thread. I sank to the kitchen floor, phone in hand, knees weak. Everything I'd saved was gone. I'd counted on that cushion to cover my mortgage while I got settled. Now it was zero. The bank gave me a grace period, but I still needed to find money fast. I stared at the walls of my empty living room, feeling a sick mix of fear and fury. This house was my baby, the symbol of my independence. If I lost it, I'd have nothing left. I'd be back to square one after giving up my youth for this stability. I tried to steady my breathing, but the panic threatened to swallow me. A darker thought crept in all this chaos, and Jake just texted me like it was no big deal. I clenched my fists. I wouldn't let him wreck my life without fighting back. Not a chance. With no savings and bills piling up, I had no choice but to liquidate. First, I listed my extra laptop, a decent one I used for freelance work, on a local marketplace. Next went my camera, a gift to myself years ago that I'd rarely used. Then the jewelry. Pieces given to me over birthdays and holidays, each with sentimental value. I hated seeing them go. One by one, I sold off almost everything except my bed, my phone, my office laptop, and a few changes of clothes. Even the boxes of brand new furniture I'd bought for the house were snapped up by strangers. They seemed happy to get a deal. I felt hollow every time I parted with another piece of my life. Each sale added a small deposit to my checking account. Pennies compared to what I'd lost. But it was the only way to keep the mortgage afloat. I'd done this once before, in my early 20s, when I had nothing. The difference was, back then, it was my choice to live lean. Now it felt forced and humiliating. Still, I swallowed the pain. This was survival mode. Jake's theft wouldn't break me. I'd fight until I had nothing left. I found Jake's new address after a few weeks of internet digging and quiet inquiries. It wasn't hard to locate once I heard whispers of him bragging about moving up. Anger propelled me to his front door, a slick modern condo in a shiny complex, a place I could never afford without draining my entire savings. Oh wait, that's exactly what he did. I rang the bell, my heart pounding. A tall, stylish woman opened the door, eyeing me with mild curiosity. Yes? Is Jake here? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She sized me up before answering in a clipped tone. He's not taking visitors. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Not taking visitors? As if he were a celebrity. I pictured him lounging around, maybe playing the role of a wealthy investor. My rage tightened my throat. Before I could force my way in, she quietly added, "He said he wasn't expecting family." Her words stung. I wanted to shout, "He's a thief. That's how he's paying for this place." But my chest felt too tight. Instead, I spun on my heel and left. Furious tears pricking my eyes. He had the nerve to flaunt a new condo, courtesy of lies and fraud. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. A few days later, my parents invited me for dinner. Desperate for support, I agreed. But the second I walked into the dining room, I realized I'd been set up. There sat Jake, relaxed at the head of the table, swirling a glass of wine. My mother brought out plates of his favorite food, chicken parmesan, extra cheese, fresh bread on the side. My father cleared his throat. "Let's talk this out like adults," he began. Jake flashed that lazy grin. He looked me dead in the eye. "Hey sis, enjoying your new house?" I clenched my fists under the table. My mother tried to pass me a serving platter. "We're not picking sides," my father continued. "We just want everyone to calm down." "Calm down?" I hissed. "He drained my bank account. I'm days away from losing my home." Jake rolled his eyes. "Stop being so dramatic. It'll be fine." I couldn't believe their nonchalance. My parents insisted I was making it harder than it needed to be. I felt like I was in a parallel universe where theft was just a sibling's spat. I slammed my napkin on the table and stormed out, heart pounding, feeling the weight of betrayal in every step. I stomped toward my car, ready to peel out of my parents' driveway and never look back. But then a voice stopped me. "Mina, wait." I turned to see Aunt Marlena, my dad's estranged sister, leaning against her old sedan. She hadn't been inside with the rest of them. It was like she'd known exactly how that dinner would end. She slipped a small folded note into my hand. "Call me," she whispered, glancing around warily. "I've been through what you're going through, and worse." My heart pounded. Aunt Marlena rarely showed up to family gatherings. She was the black sheep, for reasons never clearly explained. The next moment, she climbed into her car and drove off. I stood in the dark, the note pressed to my chest. I debated ignoring it, but something about Marlena's eyes, the urgency in her voice, told me she could be the lifeline I needed. So I left that night, adrenaline fueling me as I replayed Jake's smug grin over and over in my head. I was livid, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel so alone. Maybe Marlena had answers. Maybe I finally had an ally in this twisted family saga. The next day, I dialed the number Marlena had given me. She picked up on the first ring, voice soft yet intense. "I'm so glad you called." We agreed to meet in a little cafe outside town. My hands trembled on the steering wheel as I pulled into the parking lot. Over a cup of coffee, she told me a story that shattered my last illusions. Years ago, my mother had cleaned out Marlena's bank account using manipulative tactics, forging signatures, and staging personal crises. Marlena said she tried to fight back, but was shut down by the rest of the family. She lost her savings, her trust in her sister, and eventually drifted away to protect herself. They had only reconnected a few months ago after my mother had begged for forgiveness. She never expected they'd support Jake like this. My stomach twisted. Jake wasn't just some black sheep, he was following a pattern, one my mother had laid out years earlier. Marlena's eyes teared up as she explained how betrayal had become a twisted norm in our family. "I'm sorry," she said, voice cracking. "They get away with it because we're told to keep quiet." I felt a sickening relief that I wasn't crazy. This was bigger than one sibling squabble. It was a legacy of theft. But I vowed it would end with me. I wouldn't let them continue unchallenged. Armed with Marlena's warning, I realized I had to move carefully. Charging in with lawsuits and accusations hadn't gotten me anywhere. My family was adept at dodging blame, shifting focus, and guilt-tripping me to let it go. This time, I'd be silent and strategic. First, I opened new bank accounts at a completely different institution. I put every dollar I had left, my meager sale earnings, out of their reach. I changed my passwords, got new PINs, and flagged any old credit lines connected to Jake or my mother. Next, I began building a file, every text, every bank record, every email. I saved screenshots and arranged them chronologically. I worked late into the night. Over coffee, I rewatched that smug emoji text from Jake, letting it fuel my anger into determination. I told no one but Marlena what I was doing. I refused to give Jake or my parents a head start. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I might not fix this overnight, but I refused to be a victim. A calm resolve settled in my chest. I would gather evidence slowly, and when the time came, I'd make sure they faced real consequences. Through quiet snooping, I discovered more about Jake's new girlfriend, the one who answered the door at his condo. He was telling her our grandmother left him a large inheritance. My eyes rolled at the audacity. Grandma was broke in her last years, living on a tiny pension. There was no inheritance, only heartbreak from how little we all did to help her. Part of me wanted to knock on that woman's door again, show her the bank statements, and yell, "He's a fraud." But Aunt Marlena cautioned me. "We'll get further if we keep collecting information," she said. "Don't give him a reason to hide assets or cover his tracks." So I watched from a distance. I saw photos pop up on social media. Him taking her on expensive dinners, partying at fancy clubs, even mentioning big plans for a wellness center he was starting. I bit my lip, feeling a surge of resentment. That was my money. But for once, I didn't leap into confrontation. Instead, I quietly documented every lie he told. I screen-captured posts, kept digital receipts of everything. My heart pounded with anger every time I saw him flaunt his stolen wealth. But I forced myself to wait. Patience would be my sharpest weapon. Aunt Marlena had connections I never knew about. One evening, she introduced me to her friend Gary, a seasoned real estate investor who'd once considered backing Jake's wellness venture. We met at a small, cluttered office in the back of Gary's retail building. Gary shook my hand firmly, then got straight to the point. Jake approached me a few months back, pitching this grand idea. I almost bit. He's very convincing. But something in his finances looked off, so I pulled out. He explained how Jake claimed to have family money and flashy references that didn't check out. If you can prove what he's done, Gary said, tapping the desk, I can connect you to people who'll make sure he never pulls this again. His voice had a quiet intensity that gave me hope. Marlena nodded, encouraging me to share my file. I hesitated, then slid over the manila envelope I'd been assembling. Bank statements, text messages, photos. Gary's eyes widened as he flipped through them. You've got a strong case, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. He's not just stealing from you. He's scamming investors, too. I felt a spark of courage. Maybe I wasn't alone in wanting justice. The next few weeks felt like a secret mission. Gary reviewed my documents, tracing patterns of wire fraud, false claims, and identity manipulation. Marlena dug up old family records, highlighting how the fraudulent power of attorney was never revoked. I compiled statements from old neighbors and contacts who'd been swindled by Jake. It was shocking how many people came forward once they realized someone was willing to take action. A couple who'd been sold on a bogus vacation rental investment shared receipts. Another former friend revealed a shady e-commerce scheme. The evidence piled up like a house of cards, each piece threatening to topple Jake's empire. I fought the urge to confront him face to face. My anger burned inside me, but I channeled it into building the strongest possible case. Every time I felt impatience creeping in, I remembered the humiliating day my bank card declined when I tried to buy a couch. I thought of nearly losing my house. The plan was simple. Gather everything, then bring it to the authorities. We aimed to show a clear pattern of deceit and fraud, not just petty family drama. If we succeeded, Jake would be forced to answer to the law, once and for all. I first sensed a shift when Jake posted a cryptic message online. Life's been rough, betrayal everywhere. Some people can't stand success. It was classic Jake, vague, attention-seeking, and blaming others. But something changed soon after. His girlfriend deleted their couple photos. Rumors surfaced that she'd left him for someone else. I heard whispers of a potential lawsuit from a partner in his wellness center. Then he texted me, out of nowhere. "Sis, I just need a little help getting back on my feet. Let's talk?" My hands clenched the phone. I pictured him pacing in his fancy condo, maybe less fancy by now, trying to find a new bank account to drain. This time, I didn't reply. I let the message sit, unread in my notifications. I thought of all the nights I cried over losing my savings, all the embarrassment of pawning my belongings, the heartbreak of realizing my own parents wouldn't defend me. No, he didn't get to reel me in again. I was done offering lifelines to someone who set fire to every bridge. His world was collapsing, and I felt a simmering satisfaction. Finally, Jake's lies were catching up with him. After Jake's meltdown, my parents showed up at my doorstep, unannounced. It was late, and I was exhausted from another day of sorting evidence. My mother's eyes were red, and my father looked older than I remembered. They stepped inside like they were still welcome. "We heard you're taking legal action," Dad said quietly. "Do you realize Jake could go to jail?" My mother's voice trembled. "Family sticks together, Nina. We handle things in private. You're blowing this up." All I felt was a hollow ache. "He stole my entire life savings, then turned around and conned other people," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "What did you expect me to do? Just shrug?" Mom's gaze flickered with desperation. She reached out to touch my arm. "He's our son," she whispered. "You're our daughter. This will ruin us." I thought of every time they'd turned a blind eye to Jake's wrongdoing. How they'd let me sacrifice in silence. My anger clenched my stomach. I slowly pulled away from her grasp. "You made sure I was alone when he stole everything from me," I said, my voice shaking. "You don't get to cry now." Their plea hung in the air. I ushered them to the door, ignoring my mother's sobs. Enough was enough. The day finally came. We presented our evidence to the police and filed suit in civil and criminal court, backed by the testimonies of Gary, Aunt Marlena, and multiple victims. Jake showed up to court looking pale and thinner, his once confident air replaced by quiet panic. I sat on the witness stand, my heart pounding. I felt the weight of years of betrayal on my shoulders. Yet I forced myself to speak calmly. I described the carefully planned theft of my savings, the forged power of attorney, the countless lies. My hands shook a little, but I held on. Jake avoided my eyes. His lawyer tried to paint him as a misunderstood entrepreneur. But our evidence was unshakable. Fraudulent documents, bank transfers, even screenshots of Jake bragging about scamming others. The judge's stern gaze told me we were being heard. When I finished my testimony, a hushed silence filled the room. No tears spilled from my eyes. I felt oddly numb, like I was finally releasing a burden. Jake's face stayed impassive, but I knew he felt the noose tightening. Walking away from the stand, I realized that, no matter what the verdict, I'd regained something priceless. My voice. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Jake sat, shoulders sagging, as the judge read the decision. Guilty of multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and financial impersonation. A stunned murmur rippled through the seats behind us. Jake's face drained of color. The civil case declared him liable for the $82,000 he stole from me, plus damages and fees, a total of $102,000. The criminal charges covered the other victims he had defrauded, totaling over $2.5 million. The judge handed down an 8-year prison sentence. Assets linked to his schemes would be seized to repay what he stole. I glanced at my parents, who sat in the back, looking shell-shocked. I saw no sympathy in their eyes, only anger directed at me, as if I'd betrayed them by seeking justice. They left without saying a word. I stood quietly as officials led Jake away. He avoided my gaze, but I heard him mutter curses under his breath. My chest felt tight, a mixture of relief and sorrow. Despite everything, he was still my brother. But justice had to be done. The gavel had fallen, and finally there were consequences he couldn't dodge. Weeks passed. The legal storm died down, and I finally found peace in my little house. Paying off the mortgage became my focus. I threw everything I had left at it. My new freelance jobs, the damages from the lawsuit, every spare dollar. The day I wrote the final check, my hands shook with relief. That same afternoon, I went back to the furniture store. I found the same cozy sectional that started this nightmare. With cash in hand, I bought it without hesitation. The delivery guys placed it gently in my living room, and I sank into it with a slow exhale. The house felt warmer, like a dream finally realized. I lingered on bittersweet thoughts. My brother was behind bars, my parents wouldn't speak to me. A flicker of sadness crossed my mind. I'd lost what was left of my fractured family. But then I remembered everything I'd endured, how they dismissed my pain, how Jake smirked while draining my future. I closed my eyes, breathing in the new sofa's scent, letting relief wash over me. Justice had been served. I was free to build a life without constantly looking over my shoulder. This home was truly mine now. A few months later, I got a message from an unknown number, a single text that froze me in place. "I've changed. I was sick back then. I hope you can forgive me. We're still family." It was from Jake, likely sneaking a phone into prison. My heart thudded as I read his words. Forgiveness? He'd never once shown real remorse. He just expected me to patch things up because we shared blood. Anger sparked, but so did a sad resignation. I'd learned the hard way that people like Jake rarely change. I typed back, my fingers steady. "Family forgives when there's remorse. You showed entitlement. You stole, lied, and expected hugs. You're not family. You're just a mistake I won't make twice." I pressed send, heart pounding with finality. Then, without a second thought, I blocked the number. I felt an immediate calm wash over me, a silence free of manipulation or guilt. I looked around my living room, at the couch I had bought on my own terms, in my own house, with my own hard-earned money. The peace in that moment was 1,000 times louder than Jake's lies. And for once, silence felt like the sweetest victory of all.